live. All right. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Appreciate you joining us in this conversation about AI. Obviously, if you take a look at any of the predictions, whatever there's, we're going to get a whole even more AI than we got last year. And what we're hoping to do today is talk a little bit about our shared experiences around deploying AI, or scoping, buying, deploying, living with the benefits, the liabilities, the risks you need to be aware of, and all those different things. We brought together, I'm really excited to have the panel today. I've had a chance to chat with all of you around this conversation. And so from top right, I've got AJ Buck from Loebsack on AI deployments, what's possible, what's what to consider. I would say what's not possible, but what to consider and understand with respect to the advice that an AI chatbot may or may not do, or the automations, et cetera. David Shaw, a good friend of mine from Lively. We've had a ton of conversations in the past, had him on the Getting to Hell Yes show, talking about just AI deployments, how we can simplify life. And Marlana Murdock from Western Wealth, a recommendation from Jennifer, the new chair at RETC. So thrilled to have you on, Marley. We'll do quick intros. AJ, kick it off, and then we'll go into the first questions.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. So I'm AJ Buck. I am the single family and build to rent client relationship manager at Loebsack Brownlee. Loebsack Brownlee is a law firm currently on the East Coast, Carolinas, Georgia, Virginia, just opened in Florida and about to open in Tennessee. We offer a flat fee approach to evictions for professional property management companies. So I'm excited to be here.
Thanks, AJ. David?
David Shaw with Lively. I've been in the prop tech startup world for about 9 years after jumping the corporate ship after 10 years at Starbucks. Lively, an early entrant into the property operations space, founded in 2016. I've been full-time with Lively about 5.5 years now.
Wonderful. Marley. Oh, sorry, David.
Go ahead.
No, Marley, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Marlana Murdock, Vice President of Operations with Western Wealth Communities. We have about 6,000 units across the Texas, Phoenix, and Las Vegas regions. And this is my third decade in property management and multifamily operations. So really excited to be talking about where we're going with AI.
You've seen a few things.
Seen a few things.
You've probably seen a few fads, and you've probably seen a few.
Yes,
all right.
Sure.
Well, the idea of this show started from David's perspective at OPTECH, which AI was obviously a huge part of the conversation there, and a show put on by RETC. And the interesting thing about AI is obviously it's something that's changed most of our lives in the last 3 years, especially. And now it's kind of filtering its way into, there's experiences around implementation, and obviously filtering its way into 2026 plans. So we take a look at operational focus. And Marley, if you wouldn't mind kicking off the question here, why is AI worth discussing right now?
AI in relationship to multifamily management, the biggest discussion point, I think the best reason for people to be considering adding it to their stack is really the improved customer experience, improved compliance, and also looking at reducing the workload and the tasks on our already overwhelmed and overworked workforce. So where you can take those repetitive tasks and automate them, it just gives our team members so much more to work with when they're doing the really important high value resident facing tasks related to operating a healthy property.
And in your mind, is it because there's just simply, is it the work or the lack of talent? Like, is it a demand side or a supply side?
It's a combination of both, for sure.
Yeah,
that's a discussion, a very important discussion point, and that is the trainability of what we're asking our on-site team members to do and trying to find those people. So that it's the trainability factor that's also quite large.
I've been having conversations.
I'm an eternal optimist, so I'm always thinking that that's the last thing I want to talk about. But quite frankly, it is. And one of the things we should be always talking about at the forefront of this is the trainability of our workforce is very different than it was 5 years ago, drastically different than it was 10 years ago, and 100% different than it was 15 to 20 years ago.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. David, what are you seeing?
Yeah, Lively's actually very excited with all the conversation around AI, not because of AI itself, but because it signals the current complexity of multifamily operations, right? I think if I'm being candid, if Lively has made any single mistake in its development, it was building a solution for a level of complexity that didn't broadly exist in the market. And so now that we're in this world where the volume of resident interactions, maintenance workflows, operational data has reached and surpassed the capacity of on-site teams, we're not just talking about inefficiency gaps like we've been talking about for the last. Now we're really talking about burnout and the after and ripple effects of burnout to all the things that Marley just talked about. And so, we think that the time is now, because we thought it was beneficial, 10 years ago when we built the platform. But now that there's this complexity of operations permeating across all asset classes and all asset types, operators are now looking to solve those problems. And we view AI as a tool in our toolbox, not the end all solution, right? And I think the other thing that people are starting to realize is that operators don't need AI transformation. Really what they're looking for is, fewer repetitive tasks, like Marley said, fewer misses, and then the critical component in evaluating AI is fewer fires, right?
Yep. I find that like a lot of things in life, if you're trucking along at like 15 miles an hour, you can kind of tolerate a little bit of a wobble in your tire. The second you start going to like 30 and 40 and 50 miles an hour, and the whole thing starts shaking, that's when you start really feeling, your tires are out of balance, right? And that's when kind of I see all the time is that it's this speed and quality conversation. What's interesting about it as a seller, I'm awfully, we tend to try and open with cost savings, but I'm finding that deals are closing because of speed and quality. So those two things that you mentioned. Now, speed and quality is an interesting conversation from a legal perspective. What are you seeing, AJ?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're seeing more and more, a lot of property management companies starting to utilize AI, which is great. I always stress personally, AI should be used to enhance your teams, not to replace your teams. Mm-hmm. Especially when it comes to touch points, you still need that human touch. There's things, even from a liability standpoint, you need human eyes on things and not just trust the data that you're giving, right? So bad data in, bad data out. And what I recently read a Gallup survey that 41% of leaders don't know if their teams are using AI. Meanwhile, 52% of employees are using AI, but don't want to tell their bosses. So right there, that's opening you up to so much liability, because that is not in-house AI, right? That is Chat GPT. That is Meta AI. That is company information that is being sent out. If you don't have an AI policy in place, which I'm sure we'll get to later, that's company information that's being sent out through Chat GPT. So you could go to Chat GPT and say, hey, how does XYZ property management handle this? And if one of their employees are using that Chat GPT and they've used their company name, you can start getting information you should not have your hands on. So
it's true.
Yep. So we're seeing it implemented across the board, but not implemented necessarily in the best professional ways. And that at the end of the day is going to cost your company.
I find it hilarious that those stats, because like often as a seller, the biggest objection I get is my people won't adopt. Right. But meanwhile, you've got 1 and 2 self-adopted.
Already adopted.
Yeah. Already adopted.
Right. So you just don't know about it.
You just don't know about it. It's kind of funny, right? Yeah. So when you look at like misconceptions around AI, like, and in this kind of like this tug, people are choosing to use it. There's kind of like an awareness of using it, but there's still projects that are kind of like stalling out. I mean, I know that, like from the seller side of things and Marty from a buyer side, like there are things that get in the way of the deployments and the execution of all this. Is there a pause? Is there a direct, like what shifts or deflects the momentum around execution?
I think it's multi-layered. It depends on really who you're talking to within the organization, if you're talking to the on-site team members, they're using it in one capacity or another in their daily lives. If you're talking to people at maybe the another end of the spectrum. They don't want to use bots. They think people are going to hang up on bots. But what they don't realize is that they're already interfacing on a daily basis with bots. They just don't know it. That's because AI has gotten so good. So oftentimes it's really fear-based, or it's a complete lack of knowledge or experience related to it.
Dave, what are you seeing? What are you hearing?
Yeah, I think it's very relevant coming off the heels of OPTECH that everybody is selling an AI solution, and I've been on a roadshow this year just meeting new people in the industry, experts, people that are just dipping their toe into AI, and realizing that there's a gap around knowing what questions to ask. Like, how do you pop the hood? And then once it's open, like, how do you know what to do in there? How do you start to decipher? And there's so much at these conferences and in marketing activities that are marketing the future of AI and not selling the reality of AI today. And so it's creating this misconception that AI is a silver bullet, right? Operators are jumping to full automation and vendors are selling the vision of AI. But I think AJ said it perfectly. The foundation of the industry is not yet built or stabilized for everything that's being sold by vendors and suppliers in the AI space, right? It requires data hygiene, it requires workflow clarity, right? Knowing that your employees are already using AI, and you have to have guardrails in place, right? And so I think understanding that the reality of AI today, and there are some people that have laid the foundation, there are some people that are, some operators that are agentic AI ready today for the right solution to come along. But I think the broader market needs to understand that the reality of AI today is not replacing teams, it's replacing the noise so that teams can actually operate and do the human work that they were hired to do, that human in the loop system that AJ alluded to.
When people go to buy AI, AJ, what is the conversation that you're hearing around how often is legal being considered when they think about what the output of that AI is set to deliver?
Nowhere near enough. And, in full transparency, nowhere near enough. And what we see too, and what I'm seeing a lot, and especially from talking to different owner entities, I feel like they have a problem and they're like, oh, you know what? AI is going to solve this. X, Y, and Z has this software. I'm going to throw money at it. That's all fine and dandy if you're able to do that. But there's other things you need to have set in place. Number one, first and foremost, you need to have buy-in from your leadership. If you don't have the buy-in from the leadership, you're not going to have the buy-in from your team. And even if all leadership is not on the same page, be not on the same page in the boardroom, but not employee facing. I've heard so many times like, oh, we want to implement this. We're going to do this. Oh, but I don't agree. I think it's a bad idea. And you're saying it in front of your teams. That's not how you're going to get the buy-in from your teams. There also needs to be clear communication with your teams. The understanding that this isn't going to replace you. This is to utilize your bench talent and take you to the next level in your career development, and take the company to the next level. You have to have a clear business plan in mind with specific ROIs. If you don't have that clear business plan in mind, I hate to say it, but you're wasting money. At that point, you're just wasting your money. And then at the end of the day, you need to have an AI policy in place, the correct way to use it. And that includes training your team. So when you're looking at buying into AI, one valid question we always ask is, okay, who's training my teams? Are we responsible for training our teams? Who's training our teams? And then working with that company to develop your AI policy. But we find it stalls out the most if you don't have the buy-in from your leadership, if there's not a clear plan in place, or where technology ends and that human interaction picks up, you have to bridge that gap. It's one thing to have that data. It's one thing to have the AI bots or, whatever, do certain tasks. But it's another thing then to say, okay, then when does the team come back in place and what does that transition look like? We find that they're not, a lot of times from what I'm seeing, they're not, and my husband works in the, as a data architect. So he sees it too on that end, to where a lot of times they're just not taking into consideration any risk that they're, assuming with any sort of AI. And then, you're looking at cybersecurity risk too, not just, the input from your team.
Yep.
So we're seeing a lot of issues just across the board.
The policy is not a lot of fun.
It's not. It will protect you, and it'll protect your company, and it will make everyone on the same, page regarding the right way to use this and the not so right way to use it.
Guillermo, all great points, AJ. And I think it's important to emphasize that everything that you're articulating for the customer end user, and Marley, maybe this is something you can put in Jennifer's ear for Retsy to consider, right? But there needs to be a responsibility and a stewardship for the AI vendors as well, right? Everything that you said about going into open language models, the last couple of weeks being on the road, I've heard some horror stories driven from that exact perspective, right? The AI solutions are not being trained in a walled garden, right? It's not being layered on top of sufficient enough data. And so then they have to leave a crack in the wall for this agent to go out to the large LLMs. And that's where you start to get the hallucinations. That's where you start to get the incorrect information, because the AI model itself isn't built on sufficient enough data. And so, there's these cracks, and it goes out and it makes irreparable decisions that, can put your brand at risk, put your residents at risk, put your capital at risk. And so the guardrails and a sense of responsibility and stewardship from the vendors is just as important for the tools that we're bringing to market as for the end user operators and their AI governance policies.
It's one of the first questions you should be asking the vendors that you're looking at as part of your due diligence process is exactly this topic: is where are they with this? And what are the guardrails that they have in place? What are their workflows? What are the escalation points? How quickly can a human get involved? All of those are critical questions. I'm just coming off 2 pilots of 2 separate AI programs that we were running, and this is a biggest question for sure.
Yeah, I've heard of AI agents, promising up and down that they're communicating with management and promising multi-month concessions to resolve issues. And when it's brought to management, there's no record or awareness of any conversations happening, right? 3 months of free rent because an AI agent got backed into a corner and had to slip through that crack in the wall.
We see the same thing, like even in sales demos, we actually now get the same reaction of what our AI can do and what it won't do. We'll purposefully put in, ridiculous questions, and it'll say, "Sorry, I can't answer that. Sorry, I can't answer that." And they're like, there's a sense of ease amongst the audience when we show that out, because we want to demonstrate that we've actually engineered what it should do and what it should not do because of the hallucinations and all those things.
It's the biggest question, really, is what is it not going to do for my teams? Where are those areas that because they're all selling features and all these amazing solutions, but what will it not be doing? I think that's a great place to start. Particularly when you're looking at the readiness of your organization to adopt or even launch a pilot before you even adopt a program.
We hear all the time about, there's some law firms who have, I guess, too much time on their hands. I'm not sure, but they go after property management companies and they will call 20 times a day just trying to, get someone in a fair housing violation. So can you imagine if someone keeps asking a bot a question over and over and phrasing it differently, trying to, change up the language so that way the bot gets confused and say something, and then now you're up against a fair housing violation. So I love the point of what doesn't it do, or what, at what point will it just say, I'm not able to assist with that. Let me connect you with someone who may be able to assist.
Is there a clear line of liability? Like when you consider the parties that are involved in an implementation, fictitious technology partner, property manager, owner, and bad advice is given, where does that liability reside?
Yeah, definitely. So first, let me preference by saying that I am not an attorney. I am on the client relations side of things. However, I have talked to several of our partners regarding this, and I have heard an attorney say, that's how I can get away with, giving out this information. I've heard an attorney say that ultimately it's whatever party is using that AI, whatever party is using that vendor.
Mhm.
So if you're a property management company and you are using a vendor and they say something that's out of character, if they say something that's illegal, if they say something that, violates fair housing, that liability comes back on the property manager. Now, that's not to say the property management company then can't turn around and, have some words or have some, monetary discussions with that vendor. But ultimately, that liability falls back on the one that is using that technology. Especially if it's, for example, with maintenance, if you're a property management company, if it's in the lease that, if there's a maintenance issue, here's the correct channels you go through. And they go through those correct channels, and it's something that's, very much heavily on AI, and the person gets electrocuted, trying to do something with their breaker box because they're doing what AI tells them. That liability will fall back on the property management company.
The flooded toilet's kind of the easy example, right? Like renter's insurance won't cover that. And the liability, so that liability is not going to be covered by the resident. And so how did it happen? I think one interesting thing is that, the AI can give advice to turn it to the right. And there's no evidence of it being turned to the left. And if it gets turned to the left and there's water everywhere, then all of a sudden, who is culpable, right? And it's like, I think that's going to be something we'll see a little. I think we're going to see this in 2026 a lot more.
Right.
Is an understanding of like the human interaction with technology and the absence of an audit trail on what was done, because the direction could have been correct, but the execution could have been fail. And then that's where you kind of get a mismatch in what was actually the desired outcome. And I'll be curious to see, we've already seen a few lawsuits that have come forward that have been successful with respect to defining liability, and the end consumer is almost always not culpable. So it's going to land somewhere in between that middle ground. And that will be an interesting, I'll say, awareness as we get into it, because the legality of it all will be something that'll be challenged throughout 2026.
You already see some of the lawsuits with Waze and Google Maps. Waze had me drive my car into the water. Okay, well, you saw the water, but there's, if it's pitch black, if you're in the desert, if there's, there's always those things.
It's out there.
Right. It's going to be really interesting to see just kind of how this plays out and what sort of cases are going to set those landmarks.
Yeah,
we're definitely entering a new age of liability, a new era, a new age of liability.
So that's going to mean defensibility is, there's liability and defensibility, right? You don't really realize you don't have a defensible position until you get into court of law. If you've ever been deposed before, you realize that there's this is a factual conversation. It's not about what you thought might happen. It's about what actually did happen. And if there's a gap between there, culpability moves upstream because there's more money there. And so it's going to be interesting to see how that all kind of evolves.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason why hair straighteners say don't use while sleeping, right? Someone did it. and then the liability came back on the manufacturer because they didn't say not to use it while sleeping. That's
a really very punchy punchline.
It's true. It's
so Marley, and so I think what's interesting, we talked about how like organizational readiness and then also organizational kind of opt-in that's happening at the ground level. So how do we close that gap? Like when you have ideas for innovation that are kind of like percolating within the organization to speed up this or make this better, faster, cheaper, how is that adjudicated, especially when AI comes to play?
Well, in our organization, we start with a soft launch. We start talking about it well before we ever start even discussing a pilot or putting a pilot team together. We are talking about it in all of our executive level meetings and all of our manager level meetings. We're providing information, articles, data, all manner of information is talked about. We have a long ramp, if you will, maybe up to 4 to 6 months before we even get to the pilot of any type of initiation. So we start talking about it. It's making people comfortable. educating people along the way so they can increase their competency in a certain area, and they feel confident by the time we get to a point where we're starting to make decisions about who we're going to partner with or who we're going to start a pilot with. So that's what we really talk about. So it's a fully, everyone in the organization is aware. Everyone, all the stakeholders have buy-in, or they have, I've discussed with them, or someone on my team has discussed with them what they're looking for out of this solution, what problem we're trying to solve for them. It's a real universal discussion. It's not a top-down, hey, Marley thought this was a great idea, we're going to be rolling it out next week. It's not that at all.
How do you find, so you just got through the 2 implementations and or pre-pilots.
Yeah.
Did you guys, the second one that you bought, did you buy it a little bit differently than the first one?
Actually, we bought them concurrently at the same time.
Okay.
The 2 pilots we launched at the same time. And it was one heck of a great learning experience across the board. I would actually say that I'm a bit of an AI probably refugee at this point. Not to be too cheeky, but I'm like, wow, there's a lot there. But yeah, we launched based on, there was ownership that wanted one particular product, and we had done due diligence on several other products. And so we had one portfolio testing and piloting one product, and then another portfolio testing another. So
interesting point there. You brought up ownership. Ownership initiated one of the options.
Yes, essentially, yes.
Yeah, interesting. We're finding,
and ownership was promised that this would replace their HR payroll load. We now know 6 months later that is not the case.
Yeah, and one change in tax law, and all of a sudden, or a new person in a new state, and payroll is all screwed up.
Right. Both have been unique and wonderful opportunities to enable our teams to do better work.
Right. And now, do you find that as you look at 2026, you've got a better understanding of how presumably there's going to be an AI opportunity to buy something in 2026 that's AI related or powered by AI. Do you have kind of a better understanding of how you're going to manage the procurement for that, or the selection for those particular solutions?
Absolutely. What we've been able to learn in a short period of time, in a short pilot time, we will take into 2026. And the way that I see 2026 and our AI engagement going is we're going to be turning it way down. We're going to start with the baby steps. We now know we know the whole enchilada. Now we're just going to start with the ingredients. Yep. And we're going to start slowly layering it in and using it where it makes the most sense to solve the biggest problems. We're not trying to solve all of our problems. We're trying to solve our biggest, most immediate problems where the asset could use a lift or help, or is financially struggling. So we're going to use it in a very limited, much smaller paintbrush.
So as a vendor, right, how can we sell better into owners, into fee managers? How can we encapsulate the message a little bit better? Because part of our conversation that David I had at OPTECH is, like, first of all, we walked around and saw some of the stuff people were talking about, and intuitively there was no smoke test on any of these promises are being made. And we're kind of going, well, look, I don't know everything, but I know a lot to be dangerous. And I know that's not practically possible given the infrastructure, the data, the governance, all these things. So what kind of coaching can vendors have to do a better job at what we're positioning? Because obviously we want to position an outcome that is otherworldly, but we want to make sure we're able to implement. We want to make sure we're being responsible with what we're committing to. What kind of advice can we get?
I can kind of touch on that, even though I am a vendor, even though I'm not selling AI. One of my first things.
You might be soon.
Yeah. First off, I want to say, Marley, that I love the fact that you guys are that you're scaling things back. I think doing those 2 pilots, concurrently at the same time, I think that's how you really train your team. You start with small pilots, you build upon that knowledge base and then that skill set, and then you add some more. And for me too, I'm always big on operations. I'm always big on, my team being able to think outside the box and problem solve. And I think that's a way too to say, hey, here's what you're learning for AI. And then they'll start to think about other duties that they have or other areas where something could be implemented. And that's really how it builds upon.
100%.
Even though I'm a vendor and I'm not selling AI, I think for me, a lot of the hiccups that I come across a lot is we have a lot of legacy products that we use. We have a lot that it's hard to move away from the technology we currently have. And so for us, and I can't speak for the firm as a whole, but for me, it's about, here is our process. Here's what we're currently doing. How does your AI piece kind of fit into there without having to do a complete 180 on everything that we're doing from an operations standpoint? Mm-hmm. So for me, that's always really big. If the vendor's, willing to even look at, our current process and what we're doing and the technology we're currently using, and then say how they can integrate with that, as opposed to just being like, you're going to have to change everything sort of thing, because change is hard, right? Change is hard. It costs time. It costs your talent. So for me, it's just a lot of more about how we can integrate, and the vendor being curious about our process and wanting to help set us up for success.
Yep. I would add to that something as easy as almost like a person or character assessment of the organization. It's a readiness test is what it really is. I'd love to see more vendors across the board in the multifamily space offering a due diligence for the operator like me. Like, let me take me through my own stress test and see and evaluate my readiness, because then we're going to be able to evaluate the products that are best suited to start with. So sorry, David, I didn't mean to intervene.
No,
there.
not at all.
I think it's critically important. We are often in our industry, we have legacy friendships and big vendors and lots of enthusiasm, lots of features, and we need to get through all of that and get down to the really most important parts of what an excellent pilot is all about. And readiness is really one of those top 4 things when you're looking at launching a pilot for anything, but AI in particular, because it is a massive wave of change management.
Absolutely. I had a really interesting conversation last week, and it was sort of, the differentiation of a technology partner versus a technology vendor, right? And a technology partner is not chasing a sale. They're identifying the fit, right? And so asking the questions and being honest with your own product and your own solution with the answers, right? We've talked a lot about making sure the solution you're buying is ready for AI. But as vendors, we should be ensuring that our customers are ready for AI, right? They have clean CRM and PMS data. To your point, Marley, right? There's 1 or 2 workflows that everyone agrees must be standardized, right? And that, again, back to the realistic expectations, that the vision, everyone is aligned that it augments and not replaces on-site roles, right? And I think, you identified the one major question that buyers should be asking, right? And it should be as simple as, what specific decision, task, or workflow does your AI automate? And how do you measure that accuracy? And if the vendor starts talking about technology instead of outcomes, then you have your answer, right? And so I think a technology partner is searching for fit, right? It's mutual readiness. Does our product will our product be able to do what we says it does, because the customer is ready foundationally for that type of solution?
Well, that makes they'll reference around that one is the cement block on a Jello foundation, right? Like, if we're going to go sell you cement blocks, and it's your Jello foundation is not ready to absorb, or is impossible to absorb it, and we see that a lot on the maintenance side of things, because maintenance data is kind of the poor cousin when it comes down to data quality in a classic enterprise. And we're finding that the ability to absorb and ingest maintenance data, and especially given since a lot of it is resident initiated, it's like that's the least qualified person to create a work order on the planet, and they're the ones that are creating all the work orders. And so what do you do after that? And so I think when we look at what we do with AI, a lot of it is enhancement of data so that it can be automated rather than jumping straight to automation.
Okay.
When you take a look at that tech stack, so it's an interesting conversation around tech stack, pilot, which kind of like drips us into the conversation around point solutions. So a lot of the AI vendors were point solutions by definition. We're innovators, right? And then we integrate in with these larger enterprises, but there's a There's a ton of writing also at OPTECH around tech stack being bloated out. There's a ton of, I've got 1,000 different logins. So how do we begin to, and Marley, how do you begin to kind of like consider or is it just a straight, like these are fast and slow, like how you mentioned before? How do we think about, or how do you think about, okay, we need to innovate because we've got some clear and present problems that are not going to solve themselves if we don't choose technology. We've got to think about the overall organization and kind of the healthy organism that we operate, because we can't, we don't want to we don't want to bring in a virus here. So how do you kind of like play off those tugs?
It's a great question. That consumes a lot of my time in thinking about how that works. I off the top of my head, where I go with this is pedigree. First, I look at where they've had other really great, if we're talking about integrations and things like that, like and having a bloated tech stack. I really look at their pedigree, what their customer base is, where they've had success in the past, and these are the types of questions I ask our vendors. What other companies like mine have you done business with? Not only in size, because size is important, but also the nature of our business, the culture and style of our company. And so I'll ask those types of questions. And if it is going to be a complicated fit, I'll have our IT people take a look at the documentation, the process of it. If it's cultural, if it's too bulky, then we'll start those discussions. So we look at it from all angles. I don't ever take anyone's word for it. I've learned that lesson the hard way. Webinar for another day. But I will say that we just start really looking at what their experience is with very similar style companies to ours, and with our same or similar tech stack that we currently have. And the first thing I always ask are, what are the biggest, where are my blind spots?
Sure.
Because I'm going to try, as a process person who has grown out of a people person that's now a process person, I'm going to always look for certainly during the integration, but also through the enablement piece, where are my blind spots? So I'm going to try and serve those first. But I think we're all very comfortable now in this landscape, adding new technology and new integrations. It just really has to do with the expertise of the provider, and also what type. We love to talk about the technology of adding AI, but we do also forget. I'm the one who's constantly talking about this in our organization. Adding AI is certainly an IT initiative for sure, but it really is a people and a process initiative, in my opinion. So I sort of tend to serve that part of the organization first. But I just do a really deep dive, ask a lot of questions, get a lot of good references, find out how it's worked before, and ask the vendor directly, what are your pitfalls? Where are we going to struggle? We understand that all new technology and new integrations, there are going to be struggle points and rough spots. What do they look like from your perspective? What can we expect? Because it's all about planning and preparation on my end.
What are you hearing when you're out in the market there, David?
Yeah, I think you bring up an interesting point on point solutions, right? And the market has sort of mandated these point solutions to swim upstream to be platforms or operating systems, right? Lively was named itself as an operating system 9 years ago, and in the last year there's been 4 rebrands in the space going to operating system, because it's the buzzword right now. And so I think that introduces one level of complexity in understanding, how does a point solution become a platform or an operating system in more than just in name only. And I think the answer to that lies a little bit in what Marley was addressing, and I think you referenced on like the tech stack bloat, right? I think that every portfolio, every property is a snowflake, and the reason why a truly universal platform won't be successful is because at that scale you'll do the 80% of what everybody needs, but they'll look at their portfolio or their individual properties and realize that they need the 20%. And so that's when a point solution that goes deeper becomes the right fit. And so, I think that it's important as a vendor that you're not shoehorning your partner stack into the customer's operations. And Lively was always built as an agnostic sandbox from day one. That was our DNA and our hypothesis. So you bring your toys to the sandbox, and we make sure that they play nicely. And I think that that's going to make it hard to truly address the bloated tech stack element of our industry, because everybody is going to want certain aspects of functionality that are only going to be available in certain specific or niche providers. I think then that becomes, how do you manage that? And so getting to a true platform or operating system where it's seamless unification, right? Yeah, you might have 7 engines running in the background, but your operators are only engaging in one front end for 80% of their workload, right? Maybe there's deep data that you have to go into the single source of truth for a monthly, quarterly audits, maintenance, reporting functionality. But for 80% of their daily and weekly workflows, coming into a single unified platform, and then for the residents, right? That's sort of what kicked off this whole industry. Was we reached this, the physical amenity war had sort of reached saturation. And so then it kicked off this digital amenity arms race. And that resulted with residents having to download 7, 8, 9 apps to live in a building. And so a product like Lively and the space that we pioneered is, okay, how do we streamline that, at least for a resident? And then what we've done over the last 7, 8 years since that point is, how do we create that single pane of glass for the operators and for ownership, so that you can have the tech stack that fits your snowflake, but the experience is still singular, seamless, integrated. And I think that's the pain point that a lot of operators are looking for to solve, because of all of the new AI innovation coming out. They're bringing in 2, 3, 5 AI point solutions at one time. And so they're feeling the bloat again that felt as if it was addressed 7, 8, 9 years ago.
Well, and interesting, the bloat conversation is like, so we celebrate the fact that we're a point solution. Like, there are other alternatives out there for doing different things. And we're like, this is what we do. We want to best in the world, that period. And I take the approach that, like, hey, there's nobody on this call that's going to carve their turkey dinner with a Swiss Army knife. They're going to get a carving knife, right? You need the right tool for the right job. And otherwise you're going to go through a lot of stress and pain. So despite the fact that the featured bake-off sheet will have a tick box for, yes, you can carve a turkey with this Swiss Army knife, no one on the planet's going to do it. And so we find that by owning that slice of our vertical, we're able to articulate with clarity the liability pieces, the benefit pieces, the integrations, because we're not trying to be everything to everybody. And there are people that just simply will not buy us, and they probably never will buy us, and that's okay. And it's just kind of interesting to kind of like think about the word point solution, because it really means a specific problem and a specific solution. So I find it interesting that while it can be frustrating, there's an onus on us as technologists to ensure that we do the job that we're supposed to do that best in the world, and then push that data upstream, downstream, wherever it's supposed to go, effectively and quickly, so that it's, and effortlessly, so that it can go and do the different things it's got to do down the road, right? Yep. And I find that part there is, while people talk about the incremental overhead of having point solutions, the truth is the monoliths, they're not in the innovation business. Mm-hmm. So you can't have it both ways. You have to create a coexistence, and that's how innovation occurs. It's an interesting conversation.
You hit it right on the head, right? You have to be clear in what's critical priority for you, right? Because that's how you're going to figure out what is the 80% of functionality that actually matters to your implementation, right? And you hinted at another thing in terms of like vetting the supplier or the reputation, right? The minimum table stakes should be that the supplier is an expert on their own product, right? On their own point solution. But in this ever evolving world, and sort of hinting at some of the questions that you would ask vendors or suppliers and that you would want to be asked in return, it's important to find suppliers and technology partners that are experts on the industry, not just the solution they're selling, right? And I think that speaks to your point, Guillermo, of like, when is a Swiss Army knife sufficient for the other 364 days out of the year? And when do you need that carving knife on Thanksgiving for the turkey, right?
How do you
Guillermo,
guys-
that's funny. I always tell in our meetings, especially when I'm rolling out new things or when I'm talking to a really large scale vendor, I'm like, you're talking to a mini lith here. You're not talking to a monolith.
That's
let's,
right.
let's bring it here. What channel of business have you developed that's going to serve me?
Mm-hmm.
And for point and solutions, I think one of the things people need to be very comfortable with, because we're seeing technology change at such a rapid pace, that they have to be willing, their organization has to be comfortable to stop doing some things they used to do.
Mhm.
And I love that conversation with vendors of like, okay, well, what can I stop doing? If I start using your product, what are the other things I can stop doing? What
Right.
processes, what policies, all of that downstream? Because for a mini lith like us, strong but mighty, that's a very valuable conversation for us to be having.
Do you find that when you're considering these, especially it's a good time to chat about these, take a look at 2026, and there are burning priorities that may have been just below the threshold of prioritization, but kind of persisted year over year over year over year. And now there's technology that can make solving that a whole lot easier than before, that they can bump themselves up the priority list? Or do you find that it's still the top three that we're trying to solve all the time? And just, what's the new flavor of solving that?
No, I think we're going to be able to solve more problems. It's not the same that we're outside of some of the people problems, I would say, trainability, workforce related things that I see quite a bit of repetition. I think we're now on probably year 4 of what I would say is a cycle. But no, I think we're going to be able to start solving more problems.
So
I used to work on process. I love process, but now I'm working on products. I'm doing due diligence. That's like my whole job is just talking to technologists and vendors and partners and our preferred partners. I'm going back even to the drawing board with some of our current preferred partners and saying, hey, what can we do more of? What can you do more of? What can I stop doing? What can I start doing? All of it. So, yeah.
So from going back to the vetting conversation before and on the problems of the prioritization, as vendors, things that, what can we do? I'm sorry, David, I'll put it to you. What are you doing when you're thinking about, in light of this conversation, how we were chatting at OPTECH, and how we're going to change our go-to-market and or maybe I'll say flavor the go-to-market for 2026?
Yeah, I think we're reaching a singularity on what can your product do? What more can you do? And I think the industry needs to cross the inflection point of understanding, to everything relevant in this conversation, that the future is how, right? Because everybody's going to tell you that they do everything, because with some version of AI, can they deliver an outcome? Yeah, probably. Is it a safe, secure, scalable outcome? Probably less likely. And so a lot of where I've been spending my time this year and gearing up for 2026 is continuing to drive the conversation and the education of how do you understand the how, right? Going back to once you pop the hood, how do you understand what you're looking at? How do you ask the right questions to understand that this is going to be a safe, secure, scalable solution? And Marley, I'm glad you addressed this, because the other piece is you have to let go of the sunk cost fallacy, right? Not just gritting your teeth for the change management that comes with the people perspective, right? But if you've invested in a new solution or you've had preferred partners for years, right? Being able to release that sunk cost fallacy of we've already put so much into this, or we've already put so much on our teams, right? Selecting the right technology partner is going to help you reframe that vision and reframe that benefit. And help you manage the change management piece of the process of the people, while also delivering the process that you're looking to accomplish. And so as we go into 2026, I think a lot of those elements drive the how, and the future has to be how for us to realize the value and benefit of what's being sold and promised of AI and automation.
So then I'll kind of, as we're kind of rounding out the call here, what do you kind of go around? What do you think to be the riskiest place to start? And then which part is kind of most ready to start for AI implementations? AJ, why don't you kick it off with you from risk perspective?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think some of the most ready areas, I mean, if we're talking in terms of property management companies, owner operators, I think some of the ready areas is, if you're not using a chat bot just to even answer a client or a potential client, now's the time to start looking at those, because your competitor's using it. We're living in an age where, I mean, not so much where I am right now in Wyoming, but you go on Amazon Prime, you can have something delivered the very same day. Mm-hmm. So it's 9:00 at night, and that potential renter's online looking at their next place where they want to rent, whether it be BTR or SFR or multifamily. And the first thing that they're doing is going to the website. If they find that they have a question, they're asking that question right away. If they have to wait on an answer, they're going to move on, and they're going to go and find another management company that has something similar, ask that question, and there might be a bot right away that responds. And even if it's hey, our office is closed right now, we'll get back to you first thing in the morning, whatever the case may be. Or if that bot just starts fielding the question, yes, we do accept pets, here is the pet fee, mm-hmm. things of that nature, then they're already one step ahead of you. So I think the easiest way is just in that first initial contact. Mm-hmm. I think completely changing and overhauling your whole system and hoping it works without a clear business plan in mind, and without those ROIs and without that strong data set, mm-hmm. then you're just going to set yourself and your team up for failure.
Mm-hmm. What are you seeing, David?
Yeah, I think the safest space and where the most reputable AI solutions today are operating are on the routine, repeatable tasks of operations, right? I think augmenting your assembly line is probably the safest space to implement mm-hmm. AI today. I think that the caveat to that is be careful that you're not being sold a factory, right? And so yes. I think that's where it gets risky, right? The assembly line, the majority of successful AI solutions today are scripted, probabilistic workflows, right? Mm-hmm. It is built off of a reliable enough data set, and you're basically just training a new set of hands. I think where it starts to get risky and where you need to ask more educated questions is when you're thinking about future serving AI workflows, mm-hmm. right? The world of AI today is built on a rear view mirror, right? It's built on the data that happened up until yesterday. And so it can be valuable, but it's not going to be your full AI transformation. It's going to put you in Groundhog's Day, because every day is zero, right? And you want to drive your car looking in the rearview mirror. And so understanding that the true value of AI and the ability to buy the factory is going to come from true intelligence that is built on everything that we've talked about on this call. Clean, unified, normalized data set that covers all systems of your business, the right governance, the right training of your employees, the right guardrails for operations. And those are the areas today that I would say would be risky implementation. Somebody selling the future vision of true automation where it requires training a second brain. There's only a few people looking at solutions through that lens. Mm-hmm. And so anything that you're looking to opt in or buy for that element of AI and automation is probably the riskiest, training another set of hands to do assembly line work, pretty safe bet.
Just to add to that, like there's plenty of singles out there, right? You can get on base real easy. We don't want to be swinging for home runs every single time. And you can just hit just plenty of low risk slap singles AI solutions out there that you can pilot quickly, decide quickly, rip out quickly without having to kind of like switch out the nervous system. I totally agree with you in there. And even deploying stuff, I've been deploying stuff in my life for 25 years in tech space, and the faster, the nimbler, the kind of quicker you can kind of add it in. I think what I'd just to add to that before I pass on to Marley is that being able to prove value. So like it's kind of two stages. Prove value first before you like make sure the steering is working before you hit the gas and horsepower. And so when you think about, are we proving value first? And then when you get the value established, then mind about the integrations, because integrations is just technology. That's something you can always just do. But like, if I'm not delivering value out of the gates, you're not going to ever get to more integrations, and more horsepower is not going to solve the problem because you're going the wrong direction. So that's kind of, we kind of look at it, is that how can we begin to think about the opportunity lies with how can I begin to set the standard first, deploy it through methodology so we can do repeatable, quick lessons and learnings, and how can I get value? Like really, it is not unusual to expect value in the first week, right? So what does that first week feel like? Right. If you can do what you say you're going to do, show me in a week. And a week is really inconsequential in the grand scheme of an organization's lifetime. And if you can get to a point that you can say, yes, this can smoke test in a week, then let's try a month. And let's try, it's like dating. Now let's go even further. Let's figure that out. So I appreciate your points in both there. And Marley, if you wouldn't mind closing us out from an operator perspective, where do you see the kind of the best, easiest places to start, and the places where there's the most amount of kind of like, I'll put hair on it, most amount of thorns in the garden?
Well, going too big too fast, buying the whole factory. So what everyone, David and AJ, we've all discussed here, it's going too big too fast, thinking the silver bullet solution is there. For me, start small, start with those easily repeatable tasks, and particularly ones where either for me, it's going to be related to lead management or resident satisfaction, where a resident can self-serve themselves, or where a prospect can self-serve themselves with great data, where they can take the next step and book an appointment, where they can take the next step and file a work order, a service request, or they can ask a simple question that they'll get a quick answer on, not one that needs to be escalated back to a human. Start there, get all of your early wins there. Make sure the car has gas in it before you try and start driving it. And so those early wins not only wins the hearts and minds of your IT team and your tech team, it also wins the hearts and minds of the people who matter the most. And those are your on-site team members working in the leasing office, whose job just got this much better and they're this much happier now because these self-service capabilities that we've put in place has now given them the opportunity to do better with themselves in their role and their career in other areas.
And then they have time for those human touch points.
100%.
They have those time for those human touch points, for those, temperature checks with the residents and with other vendors. And it opens up a whole new possibility for them. Right.
It's very true. Like, this is still a people business, and that's not going to change. But how can we make sure we're getting making the lives easier for the people that run the business? Right. How can we make that happen? Well, thank you everyone for today. I really appreciate everyone bringing their personal backgrounds, and the audience appreciates everyone's bringing their personal backgrounds to the conversation, because there is a bit of a gut check right now where everyone feels like they got to go into this space, but they don't really know. They may not know the how. They may not know the edges of the cliff. They may not know where it is easy to start and where they got to prioritize. So appreciate everybody sharing their experiences as far as that's concerned, because it's going to be a big change. And there's a couple truths that we all can agree on, is that 2 years from now, you're not going to be not using AI. Like 12 months from now, you're not going to be not using AI. Your people are going to pull it out of your hands if you're not going to be enabling that. They're already, to your point, AJ, half of them are already using it, and they're already clamoring for it. It's closing a gap that doesn't exist, or that exists. More solutions exist, I should say. And so if the people are pulling for it, the residents are pulling for it, then it's kind of our obligation to make sure we usher it through the smoothest, safest, most compliant way possible, so that we can learn from the adoption experiences like Marley was talking to, because otherwise we are going to kind of get left behind. Like, this is a left behind moment. It's just like, it's still a little bit precarious as to how we get there. And so, like, yeah, let's not rush across the spine of the mountaintop, because that's also got some problems to it as well.
Right.
So appreciate everybody joining us today and everyone listening in today. And I look forward to this conversation further in 2026. And if you have any questions for the folks on the panel, obviously reach out to them on LinkedIn. They're connected to the show. We'll push this out as a podcast for everyone to listen to otherwise. If you have any questions or comments, put it on the LinkedIn on the show event, and we'll be able to get to it and answer any questions. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, AJ, David, Marley. It was wonderful having you. And enjoy the rest of have a great holiday. Be safe.
Thank you.
Thank
Same to everyone.
You too.
All right. See everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.